The Philosophy of Composition by Edgar Allan Poe. According to Poe, the plot of a novel must be set out in detail before the conclusion is reached. The denouement should always be in the mind of the writer, otherwise, the plot will not be worthwhile. Moreover, the purpose of writing a novel will also be lost. History is the base for ideas. It gives material for the story. This material deals with description, dialogue, and the comment by the author. But originality alone gives effect to the story. Effect includes incident and tone. With regard to the magazine paper, the author can make it interesting with details built up step by step. Only then the composition will gain value and interest. But the author does not release one such due to his vanity. No poet allows the public to have a peep into his crude thoughts. At the same time, it is uncommon to retrace the steps by which he had attained conclusions. Poe feels that he can recall the progressive steps of any of his composition and show its modus operandi. Writers do not write by accident or intuition. It is done like a mathematical problem. Poe wants to show this with his poem, The Raven. Poe lists the essential of composing a poem. The first one is the length of the poem. A literary work should not be too long to be read at one sitting. A break in the reading will make one lose the trend. It would interfere and spoil the impression. A long poem is a succession of small ones. While prose works need no unity, poetry aims at a total effect. That is why Poe reduced the length of the poem Raven to 108 lines. Beauty is the main desideratum of a poem. It does not mean a quality but the effect. Poetry elevates the soul intensely and purely. Intellect has no role to play here. Truth and passion are easily attainable in prose. If they are introduced into a poem, they will produce discords. Next to beauty, tone is important for a poem. Whatever quality beauty might be, it excites the sensitive soul to tears. Melancholy is the most suitable of all poetical tones. Artistic piquancy is the keynote of a poem. The whole poem revolves on it. It is called refrain. It helps to improve a poem. Refrain depends on the forces of monotone. Repetition produces a strange effect. Poe wants to use the monotone to create new effects by varying the refrain. After deciding the refrain, the poem should be divided into stanzas. The refrain formed the close of each stanza. To give force, refrain must be sonorous. The long O is the most sonorous vowel. The most producible consonant is N. In keeping with the sad tone of the poem Raven, Poe uses the word nevermore. If the word is used by a human being, it will be monotonous. So a bird, a raven, is selected. It is a non-reasoning creature, capable of speech. First, he selected a parrot, but he decided on raven as it will be suitable for the intended tone. The raven is a bird of ill omen. It repeats the word nevermore at the end of each stanza. The title Raven will tell of sadness. The saddest event in the world is death, and particularly the death of the most beautiful woman. So Poe chose that. Then Poe combined the sad aspect of the woman he loved with the often repeated word of the raven, nevermore. The raven answers the questions posed by the lover to it. The intended effect was produced by what Poe calls variation of application. The raven repeats the word nevermore to the afflicted lover ominously. The continuous repetition makes the word nevermore a sort of superstition. It kindles questions, and the answers are half superstitious and half desperate. Poe begins his poem with the climax. He calls the raven the prophet of evil. He asks the bird to tell him by the God that governs the lives of both when he can clasp the sainted maiden, Lenore. The raven replies, nevermore. After establishing the climax, Poe varies the importance of theme and settles the rhythm, the meter, the length, and the general arrangement of the stanza, trochaic meter and octometric lines. The musical quality of the verse form is enhanced by the use of internal rhymes and alliteration. Poe attempts to bring together the lover and the raven by the locale or setting. The bird is seen in the broad air. The incident is insulated, so the space where the raven is placed is circumscribed. Poe keeps the lover in a chamber richly furnished and beautiful. The lover is reminded of his lover who frequented that place. The raven enters through the window. The flapping sound of its wings makes the lover open the door. It is dark outside. He feels that it is the spirit of his mistress that has knocked the door. The raven seeks admission, enters in and sits on the bust of Pallas. To all questions it replies nevermore. The repetition of the word confirms the lover's sorrow and self-torture. For such a subject as in Raven, there must be some complexity. It can be called adaptation. It refers to indefiniteness, which makes the poem rich. Poe added the last two stanzas for such suggestiveness. The lover asks the raven to take its beak from his heart and take its form from his door. The raven replies, nevermore, lending a moral to the poem. The reader now feels that the raven is emblematical. Thus, Poe gives his theory for composition and explains it with his poem Raven.